So now it's time to look at our audience. It is always really important to understand who our audience is, right? Especially if we want to pitch a movie to a producer. But here is where the creative process between developing a regular movie and a VR movie starts to appear. Because here we need to really understand the audience way earlier in the process. And this is simply because the audience is going to be inside our experience. So we need to understand them very well in order to anticipate to how they will react to the content. So let's do this. The tool we're going to use is called user persona, and it's a very common tool in design thinking processes. This tool helps understand who is our audience to make decisions based on their behavior and their personality. Of course, when building a VR story, what we want as creators is that everyone loves our piece. But there is always a target audience for every single story. So, in a way, we're trying to identify who is our ideal audience so as to make design decisions based on them. So, for example, here is John. He's a fictional person, but I've tried to be really accurate when defining him so as to understand how he will react and behave inside my story. So, for example, let's look at John. John is 17, he's from the US, he's a student, and his quote is life now. So, by this quote, I can understand that he's someone who likes to make the most of his days. His ambitions is to be a firefighter, to have a girlfriend, and to be fit. And his frustrations is that he's not fit, he's single, and he still lives with his parents. He has a personality that's rather optimistic, and also he's rather an extrovert. And as motivators, this is really, really important because this is what moves me to act. There might be people that fear is their main stopper, but others, like John, that just to achieve new things and to be able to brag about them a little bit, they will do anything. And this is even more important than his natural curiosity. And as hobbies, he likes to play games, to travel, and to watch action movies. John is not intended to be the only person that's going to like my story, but he does represent a group of users that could potentially like it. So now that we know our audience, it's time to make a few decisions on how their experience will be. So, in the first place, we need to decide whether our audience is going to experience our story in the first person, which means that they're going to see the world through the eyes of one of the characters, or in a third person, which means that they are going to see the world through their own eyes. But bear in mind that in VR, there is never such thing as a neutral observer. Because by default, by being inside a story, we feel a sense of responsibility and we always try to find our role in that place. In my case, I want my audience to live the story in first person through the eyes of Paul, my assistant. We will also need to take a few more decisions. In the first place, which level of interaction does my story offer to the audience? For example, here we have three different types of interaction. The first one, watch, decide where I want to watch. By default, any VR experience offers this level of interaction. Secondly, talk to characters. And thirdly, interact with objects. This could mean just grabbing them, or maybe I am allowed to perform something with that object. Then we will also need to decide which rules do audience need to learn in order to enjoy this world to the fullest. And finally, decide on how we are planning to teach them. So, in my case, my audience is allowed to walk around and interact with a few objects. What they need to learn is to identify the objects that allow for interaction, as well as that the key actions don't take place until they are ready to look at them. Therefore, they shouldn't be afraid of spending too much time wandering around, because none of the key action points of my story is going to happen if they are not watching. And thirdly, the way I'm planning to teach them is by increasing the level of interactivity of each wall as they transition from the first one to the last one. Great. So now go ahead and start building your user persona, your ideal audience. And here I would just like to make super clear that even we're building some sort of character to identify who is our ideal audience, it shouldn't be confused with the characters in our narrative. We're simply trying to identify and anticipate to the reactions of our audience so as to design the best experience for them. So thank you, and I see you in the next chapter.